I spoke with Councilman Hairston, and he's in agreement to have comment at the meeting, and then I'd like to hear from our staff, and then we'll go in that order. We'll discuss the rule, then we'll discuss operations. So with that, I don't have the order with which the requests came in. Madam Clerk, do you have the order with which requests to speak have come in?
No, I do not.
I'm going to go in order that I see people on my screen then. And I'm going to begin with Nora Kelly, who resides in Ward 17. I would ask her if she could provide 2 to 3 minutes worth of comments, and then we'll move to the next.
Sure thing.
Kelly, thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today. Again, my name is Nora Kelly, and I'm a resident of Ward 17, and I'm here representing Clevelanders for public comment. Tom Johnson, the great Cleveland mayor at the turn of the last century, identified, quote, inertia as a great obstacle to important moral changes. His warning that, quote, indifference is the enemy of progress is as true today as it was over 110 years ago. When residents are limited in their input into city government, that sense of apathy and indifference grows, as does a lack of accountability of public officials. Clevelanders for Public Comment has a partial cure for these diseases of democracy, inviting and encouraging public participation in the affairs of government by offering residents the opportunity to speak directly to their elected officials as a body or in committee meeting. On January 29th, residents from all 17 wards wrote a letter directed to the council president with copies furnished to all members of council concerning practices, with emphasis on the need for public comment at committee and full council meetings. We received responses from a number of council members. However, we did not receive any response for over 2.5 months from Council President Kelly, to whom the letter was directed. And when we did, we received an undated response. In the intervening time, Clevelanders for Public Comment has done the heavy lifting to provide Clevelanders with a greater voice in their government. We have organized residents in all wards, written opinion pieces for major publications, presented a full city club forum, including 30 minutes of public comment from Cleveland residents, established a vibrant website, and built community support for the measure. Additionally, coalition member and fellow lawyer Jessica Trevisano, who you will hear from momentarily, researched and crafted the public comment ordinance supported by many of you. Jessica's thoughtful and rigorous work was recognized by several publications. Clevelanders for Public Comment brings together a diverse group of 29 organizations, ranging from civic and advocacy organizations to labor unions. In addition to members of this body, elected leaders in the state legislature and the county council have also signed on in support. Interestingly, we've yet to hear of any group opposed to the 30-minute public comment period at council, let alone individual residents who believe that the time has not yet come to invite and encourage greater civic engagement. Our group is perplexed at why such a common sense proposal with near universal support has not been quickly embraced by all council members. The status quo and Byzantine rules for public input is no longer palatable. For example, several of us tried to sign up to talk at this committee meeting on Friday, despite the fact that no agenda had been posted. Note that this was for a Monday meeting at 1 p.m. This is clearly not a system designed to produce public participation. Moving forward, we are hopeful that this body moves quickly to implement public comment with a policy designed to make the sign-up process transparent and accessible, not opaque and burdensome for residents. The process of adopting and implementing public comment is straightforward. After all, it is a nearly universal practice guaranteed by other local governing bodies. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kelly. And in the order I see people on my screen, I see Jessica Trevisano from Ward 15.
Ward 3, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Trevisano. I'm a resident of Ward 3. I drafted the proposed public comment ordinance for Clevelanders for Public Comment, and I just wanted to highlight some of the key values and provisions of that policy. The ordinance proposed by Clevelanders for Public Comment lays out a specific process for public comment at both council and committee meetings and hearings. That process is meant to be clear for any person trying to figure out what they need to do in order to address council. I'm grateful to have been given this opportunity to address these committees today, but even I, as an attorney with experience reading rules and addressing public bodies, wasn't sure if I was doing it right when I made the request to the committee chairs to comment today. I also wasn't sure how much time I'd be given to address the committee, so I'm happy to hear I'll have 2 to 3 minutes to get through my comment. Any public comment policy adopted by council needs to take the guesswork out of public comment. If a policy is unclear or requires guesswork, it will be a barrier to people who want to address council or committees. I urge you to ensure whatever public comment process is adopted is clear to everyone and not an overly complicated set of rules that requires a law degree to understand. The public comment process that was proposed by Clevelanders for Public Comment provides a 30-minute public comment period at council meetings, with each person having 3 minutes to address council. People would sign up ahead of time to address council, and they could do so once every 30 days. The process would be first come, first serve, but would prioritize residents of the city of Cleveland. And the form for signing up would be available online and in person, in English and in Spanish to help with accessibility. I also want to point out that the public comment ordinance that we have proposed does not refer to a speaker, speaking, or being heard. We were very intentional about using language that does not exclude people who do not hear or speak, or speak or hear. The sign-up process is nearly identical for addressing committees. At committees, individuals would be limited to addressing only matters on the agenda for the meeting. As Nora pointed out, there was no agenda items published for this special meeting. By default, each person would have 3 minutes to address a committee. The chair could alter the time limit for comments on any given agenda item, but would have to do so uniformly for all people addressing that same topic. We've been careful to ensure that the proposal is viewpoint neutral and would not put council in a position that would make it likely for council to run afoul of the First Amendment. I believe that the proposal that we've put forward is fair, and I think it's good policy. I want to clarify that I think enacting the public comment policy is the priority, and it could be done either as a rule or as an ordinance. The policy that Clevelanders for Public Comment has proposed has been vetted, it's been tested at the City Club, it's received widespread support from residents, advocacy groups, the media, and 9 members of City Council. I've also prepared an amendment to the rules that integrates the policy that Clevelanders for Public Comment has proposed, and I'm happy to share that with this committee. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you all very much. There was a third speaker, but I don't see anybody else on the screen. Okay, unless there is another speaker that had requested, another member of the public that requested, I'm going to thank Ms. Kelly and Mr. Visano for your participation. And then I want to move forward with the meeting now to your thank you. I want to hear from Ann Tilley, John James, in terms of what you've looked at other cities and made some recommendations of what this should look like. I appreciate your taking the time to do that and to do the survey of cities. My take on this as we move forward, and we'll adjust as needed. But to me, this is something that Charter Section 29 just gives us the authority to do. To me, it's a matter of we just have to make a decision if we're going to do it, and if so, it's just a change to Rule 7, and the heavy lifting is going to be in the operations of it. But with that, I want to hear from
Mr. Chairman, point of personal privilege.
Councilman.
Yes, can we have a roll call of who's in attendance of the 2 committees?
We're not going to vote on anything, but if you'd like, we certainly can.
Yeah, I'd like to know who's in attendance. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Let's just call the roll of both committees, please.
Hairston.
Here.
Griffin.
Here.
Joe Jones.
He's here.
Kelly.
Here.
Joe Jones, I'm sorry, I'm here. Please forgive me.
You're good.
McCormick.
Present.
Polincic.
Present.
Slife.
Present.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. So getting back to the matter at hand, the issue of adding a public comment period has been raised, and it's been Councilman Spencer has had conversations with me about it. I heard I did a listening tour. I heard people, express this, and it is now before the Rules and Operations Committee. And I want to begin by recognizing our staff that worked on this issue as we basically make a yes/no decision to amend the rules, and then we have to make a determination of what this looks like for operations. So, John and/or Ann.
Oh,
I'm going to
start off with an overview on what we did, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ann, who will go into what we found as we did our research. Ann and I looked at 19 cities that allow for public comment at city council meetings, and we also looked at how much time is allotted for comment. One of the things that we also did, we also looked at whether or not council allows for a public comment meeting at council committee meetings. We also looked at the public comment policy, if the policy is included in the city code or if it's included under the rules of council. We also looked at the rules of conduct during the public comment portion of the council meeting. And we also looked at how the public comment process is coordinated in the council office as well. What we did, we had summed up our research, and what I'm going to do is turn it over to Ann Telly, who will go over the results of our findings.
Thank you, John. Ann?
Thank you, John. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I think John did a really great summary of kind of our process and how we went about this. We tried to look at cities that were similar to Cleveland in terms of size, scope, their process. So I will not go into every single city. I think we have better use of our time than to look at 19 different cities, but I'll kind of give a high level looking at. We looked specifically at the position of public comment, of where it takes place during a council meeting, how long the process is, how much time each speaker gets, and then when meetings are held, because that does matter in terms of accessibility. We also looked at the procedure to sign up, what does that infrastructure look like? And then lastly, what are the kind of rules of quorum that govern that process? So I will say as a whole, there was a lot of congruence among the cities of how that process works. Some variations here and there, but really quite aligned, which made, I think, perhaps the research a little easier in that sense. So I'm pulling up my notes here just so I make sure I don't miss anything. So kind of looking at, in terms of best practices, guiding our recommendations, and I feel free to stop me if you have questions or need clarification. I realize my brain doesn't quite work the same as everyone else is going through this, but so we figured 30 minutes was a general standard of time allowing for public comment period. This, in almost all instances, happened very early in council meetings. So, after kind of a roll call, any sort of invocation, but before you get to like the meat and bones of the meeting in terms of legislation. So in Cleveland, we imagine this happening after condolences and congratulations, but before the first readings. And so we noticed that the period of time could be extended if there was an agreement of the council body to do so, if there's particular legislation coming up that the public is particularly persistent about. And so then looking at the amount of time each speaker gets, it generally fell somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes. So, putting that back to that 30-minute period, it's really a matter of, do you want more breadth of speakers or more depth of speakers? So that's perhaps a decision point we see in our proposal. So then that's looking at the time and position, looking at to the more procedure and infrastructure. Setting a deadline of when speakers would need to sign up. I think this perhaps leads to more the operation side, and we can talk about that later, of what does that look like in terms of staff managing that process. But anyone who wishes to sign up would be assigned a time and place to speak. So there's a general understanding of, if you're fourth in line, you will speak at approximately this time. Those participants are allowed to speak once the presiding officer recognizes them. And when we really want to focus the speaking opportunities being limited to residents of the city of Cleveland or business owners in the city of Cleveland. We also look at the infrastructure of completing that sign up form, whether that be online in terms of like a little widget or a paper copy that's available at council offices. Obviously,
some considerations during COVID times. That's something we would hope to see when we're all back in the office and I can see everyone's faces. We want to be able to fill out that form in its entirety so it's complete. Otherwise, it would be considered invalid. The sign-up sheets, we would hope to consider the person's name, their address, their contact information, in case we need to get in contact with them as staff members, identifying the ordinance or resolution they would want to speak on. That would be on the agenda, and then disclosing whether that person is being paid to speak or representing an organization, just trying to make sure we're very transparent of the intentions of who is speaking. I was notified by our council staff attorneys that we do want to disclose that anything that is submitted by the public to our office would be subject to Ohio Public Records Law. So we want to be transparent there of where that information goes and is stored. And then perhaps I'll move into more of the rules and decorum of what happens once we do have that public comment period rolling in council meetings. We want to really stick with our Robert's Rules of Orders, making sure that there's not people talking over each other, just arguing. So really kind of keeping that nice decorum. We don't want speakers to be using foul, explicit, or indecent language that would be harmful or offensive to others. We would want speakers to address the council as a body, not singling out individual council members or individual council staff. We think it would be important that speakers may not yield their time to other speakers, that's a precious time they've reserved. We look to see speakers only speaking once per calendar month, given of how council operates, especially during summer recess, when there's limited number of meetings in the summer. We don't want those speakers to engage in any sort of electioneering or endorsement, promotion of a product. This is for engaging council and the city leaders. Those public comment periods will be heard in the order they were received, and any comments that can't be heard in that 30-minute period for whatever reason, we would prioritize them at the next council meeting. We also notice a lot of themes of making sure when those public comments are given, we want to be respectful. We also want to maintain that order for that 30-minute period. So we would ask that council members not directly respond to public comment other than following up like a coordination of like, hey, give me your phone number and we'll talk later, but really making sure that process runs smoothly and is respectful. And then lastly, we also noticed to varying degrees, anyone who breaks that kind of decorum is disrespectful, not following the rules, we would ask them to stop and comply with the rules. If they continue to break decorum, we could ask them to leave. And then if it's severe enough, revoke speaking privileges. So that was a very fast overview of kind of the summary of what we found. Like we said, there's a lot of congruence among cities. These generally fall in the best practices. There are some differences here and there, but I think this really highlights the bulk of it. So I will stop there and see if there are any questions or comments or clarification.
Thank you, Ann. I've got a couple questions, then Councilman Brancatelli. So just the high level view is a 30-minute period in which time speakers could speak between 2 and 3 minutes. All speech would be related to agenda items that were being considered by the council that evening. And by my readings, so you think it would, I'm looking at Rule 7 right now, it should be somewhere after disposal of journal. Is that what you're thinking? After we do the Pledge of Allegiance, dispose of the journal, you think right after that? Is that the recommendation?
We had originally said after condolences and congratulations, but we think really anytime after roll call and before the first readings. So okay, that would be fitting.
Okay, fair enough. Councilman Brancatelli?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick comments. I think what's also important to note is that we've had public comment for a long time, and certainly have had public comment in many of our committees. I'm not sure, 2020 was an anomaly. Obviously, dealing with the pandemic has made life difficult for everyone. So using that quite as our basis is would be really an incomplete view of how we do business. But historically, we've had public comment in our committees, my committee at DPS, We also have a significant amount of public comment in the community. As many of you attend public meetings, civic meetings, organizations, block clubs, you name it, and the many evening meetings, we have a lot of public comment. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be able to represent Ward 12 and attend the many meetings that we currently have that go on when we're not in a pandemic, but to really engage the pulse of our community and get feedback from our residents. Many of my residents would not have the ability to come down to City Hall or the desire to come down to City Hall, but would rather deal with me face-to-face in our community as we are elected to represent them and bring our representation back down to City Hall. So with that, Ms. Tell, do other bodies, have you looked into how other bodies have public comment during some of their committee structures, or did you not go that deep?
Yes, so our primary focus was on public comment in council meetings, but in our research, of course, we came across there's many cities that also direct public comment into their committee structure. The sign-up procedure is a little different because, you know, the way agendas come out for committees are perhaps less predictable than council meetings where we know every Monday night they're going to happen. But still a sign-up procedure of contacting staff or the chairperson to get on that agenda and then following through from there.
Great. Yeah, I mean, our city and our committees and our structures and how our wards are set up really do engage for residents to have direct feedback to council members. So it's been a great process, and I certainly endorse as we have public comment continue in all the various fashions that we do. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Councilman Plensic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my honorable colleagues, and to the thanks to Ms. Kelly and Ms. Trevisano for the due diligence that they did and our own council staff. My question is to John and to Ann. Looking at the other municipalities, I'm intrigued by the actual location. Is the public comment done right in the chair in the room where the meeting, their regular meeting takes place, or is it done in an ancillary room prior to the meeting?
To the councilman through the chair, a little bit trickier to answer. I know during COVID that changed a lot of policies, and that, you know, was reflected in our research. But I would say for the most part, it was done in a council meeting in the physical room. There are a few cities, and I'm going to blank on exactly which ones, that actually had the public comment period, had council recess for a brief moment, and then come back. So it was almost like a separate portion, but it was still tied to the meeting. And I would note that many of the cities we looked at hold their council meetings at like 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. So it's a little different in terms of operations compared to how Cleveland does, having it at 7 p.m. on a Monday, which is not during the regular daytime.
Yeah. And in the past, you know, part of the historical discussions had been the reason for the meeting in the evening was for the fact that, you know, Cleveland was a very blue collar town and people worked during the day. And if they wanted to participate in the council meeting, or at least to observe the council meeting, it was their opportunity to do that at 7 o'clock in the evening. And I know what I will tell you in the day, because I know things have changed substantially, and I'm talking prior to COVID and even many, many years ago, there would be times that council chamber was nearly filled. I know some of my colleagues might not believe that when you look at the attendance, how the public attendance has dropped off over the years. But at times, I mean, that place was packed. It all depended what issue was before us and what we were voting on. So there had been a great deal of participation in the past. When I chaired committees in the day, I would always ask for public comment, and there were residents or participants who came up and testified at various committees. So to my knowledge, that that portion has always been permitted and allowed. Now, maybe some people who've chaired over the years don't understand that process, but that had always been the mechanism where anyone who wanted to comment from the public could do that. So part of the discussion, and also to my colleagues, part of this discussion in the past had been to utilize the committee room for the public portion or the public comment. So you're not aware, Ann or John or anyone, you made brief mention that there would be an adjournment or something like that, but you're not aware where that would take place prior to the actual council meeting starting.
I believe there was one instance, and I will double check in my notes which city that was, but almost all of the other cities occurred in the same vicinity. It wasn't separate or in a separate space. It was in their chambers or equivalent. John, did you?
One comment I'd like to make: the city of Detroit, Michigan, their city council once a month, they go out into the community for a council meeting that's known as a community engagement session.
Right.
Where they basically allow for citizens to make comments to the council on any topic or any subject matter. And then the city of Charlotte, their city council, and I believe it may be the fourth council meeting, the last council meeting of the month, but they have what's called a public forum meeting where citizens can make public comment to the council on any topic of their choosing.
Okay. And those are regular roll call meetings of that council?
As far as I know, they are. I know when I spoke with the city of Detroit, their city council, once a month, they go out into the community and their council engages the residents.
Yeah. I know there had, Mr. Chairman, honorable colleagues, I know had been efforts in the past to have council meetings out in the neighborhoods, and I know was a part of that. But part of the challenge that we had there, we were finding there was a very poor turnout in the neighborhoods when we did that. And then there was the cost associated with that of bringing staff on overtime and then having to assign other city employees to that event, including having to assign a multiple number of police officers to guarantee the safety of the public coming to the meeting and vice versa, and members of the administration and council. So there was a cost associated with it as well as taking it out. Pardon?
If I can suggest, Councilman and John, let's just go do one topic at a time.
Okay.
I want to just, the issue for today, whether we move to add sections of rules that would allow public comment to our Monday meeting.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, I support that. I was just trying to understand the mechanism and how we do that.
Right.
I'm supportive of the public comment, have been for a very, very long time. And so I'm on board with that. I wanted to understand where it would fit into the council meeting and how it would be structured. That was my main question and concern. Thank you.
Okay, so, thank you, Councilman. Let me, and I see that Councilman McCormick and Councilman Griffin are on the list. What I'd like to do, if it's okay, is I'd like to just, again, this is like a two steps to today's meeting. The first is the rule portion. The second is the operation. So I would like to, first off, I'll recognize everybody who has raised their hand. Is there anybody who's on the Rules Committee that would not support a recommendation that we add a rules portion, the summer of which has been described, to the Monday night meeting? Speak now. Okay, so now at this point,
Mr. Chair, I guess I'm a member of the Rules Committee, and I just have a point of clarification.
Yes.
I'm supportive of public comment, but I'm unclear on the mechanism that's being suggested to institute it. And I mean, just to react to something that's been said about the existence of public comment in committee meetings and existing processes. Now, I know that I'm newer than some, but I've been around City Hall for nearly a decade, and I'm not entirely sure of what the process has been, nor have I seen it often of what comment is as a committee meetings. And I only bring that up because to me that's perhaps evidence that we are overly reliant on an oral tradition, and if information isn't being passed on unintentionally, then things can fall through the cracks. And I guess that's where I see a lot of value in the proposal of this as a legislation to codify it and explain it so that there's not that ambiguity. But I guess my question is, I'm unclear on how we are discussing instituting this.
Okay, so the suggestion is that we change the council rules to add a public comment portion to our Monday night meetings sometime after the call of the roll and before the beginning of first reading of legislation. Comments would be limited to 30 minutes total, with 2 to 3 minutes allocated per speaker for an item that's on the agenda.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think we're all both there's clearly multiple paths to the top of this mountain, and I think that both are worthy of discussion in their own right. So with that I'll yield and listen to the rest of the presentation.
Okay, so thank you. So does anybody oppose the recommendation that to change it? We would have to all vote on the rules. Does anybody object to it? Because I don't want to move, because the operations is going to be heavy. So what we're going to do is that our attorneys will draft the rule change in the rule committees and and then all members will have to vote on it. But again, it's the operations part that's going to be just a little bit more complicated. So with that, I think we are quickly moving into operations type questions. So let me begin by recognizing Councilman Kerry McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just before I start on the clarification point, so our attorneys will draft the rule, send it to us, then we'll have time to review it and then vote on it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. We're not voting on it today. Got it. Okay. No, okay, that's good. So thank you again, Mr. President, for pulling this committee together. And again, this is something that I very much support, the public comment within our council meetings itself. I mean, I am also one of those members of council that attends block club. I've been to more block clubs in my life than probably most, combined residents in the city of Cleveland. I'm a block club aficionado, so I very much see the value of block clubs and community meetings when it comes to receiving community input. Obviously, we also live in our communities, so we go to the grocery stores and we walk up and down the street every single day. All of that is really important way to interface with our residents. With that said, I also believe it's fundamentally important to allow for the public to address the elected branch of Cleveland City Council and of government in the meeting. To me, that this is just a fundamental basic of good government. And it's something that I will tell you from my perspective has always been somewhat awkward for me as a newer member just finishing up my first full term, that this has not been in place. So I fully support bringing public comment to Cleveland City Council. I think that the Clevelanders for Public Comment have drawn up a really thoughtful proposal. So I think that we should base our policy off of that proposal. And again, to me, it's a really well thought out proposal of details of how to run this properly. So again, fully support this, and we can figure out whether is that a legislative or a rules. If it's a rules change, I think we still have to legislate a rules change. So I'll have to learn more about that process. But again, from my perspective, this is just it's a basics of good government. I welcome the public comment. I believe it enhances the day-to-day feedback that we all get on a daily basis as a council member. So I just speak in full support of this, and I want to thank the community members that have taken so much time to put together this proposal. I think a lot of times when we engage with the community, whether it be lead paint or infant mortality or completing green streets and otherwise, we get really good policy because our community, along with us, know what's going on in the street the best. So support this policy change, and I think it'll be a great thing to have and provide access to the community.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Blaine Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I echo the comments of what everybody said. A lot of us have been to more street and block clubs and everything else in between. And some of us are like Councilman Joe Jones, where we get calls all times of night about different things that are happening in our community. So definitely understand that. I also want to make sure that people understand that who can be against trying to have more public input and public comments. So I support the rule change. I support this. I do believe that the citizens have come up with a very thoughtful proposal. I do think that there's some things that I would like to make sure that our council attorneys make sure that we're on fair ground. But I do want to express one concern, and I would just is not to try to, disregard the proposal or anything else, but this council has really worked hard on equity and has worked very hard on trying to be equitable. And I would tell you that some council people have different constituencies than others. And to have some council members that might have public groups that will descend upon city council to give input on different topics. There's other wards that may have other challenges. And so the one concern that I do have is that it's equitable across the board, that it's not just a small vocal minority, even though I can't fault anybody if they have the organizational skills in order to try to galvanize their constituents. But many of us have to speak for some of the communities that just for whatever reasons have not spoken for themselves or don't have that ability. So I just want to be careful that, I learned a lesson a long time ago about equity. And if everybody could just bear with me, and then I'll be quiet, Council President. I learned one time about a street light. And if it was in a affluent community, everybody in those communities will be complaining about that street light being out. But then there's other communities that may not complain about it because, quite frankly, that street light or that infrastructure issue is something that they just feel like, that's not the worst thing in the world happening to me. But I believe that street light should get fixed regardless if somebody speaks up for it or not, regardless it's in an affluent community or non-affluent community. And as council people, we're often sitting here to try to, provide equity and to try to make sure that we listen to everybody. So I just hope as we go through this process that really we keep equity in mind, that one group, one area, one part of town, whether it's Ward 6 or whether it's Ward 8 or whatever, doesn't dominate the conversation, especially as we talk about macro issues as well. So I hope that we officiate that the best that we can. I hope I'm being clear what I'm saying, because nobody can be against democracy, but I just want to make sure that we don't allow ourselves as council that one group, one area, one part of town, another part of town pretty much controls the narrative of the discussion, because some of us have to speak for that group that oftentimes is suffering in silence. So I just want us to keep that in mind, and I hope that the public keeps that in mind as we continue to have these deliberations. But who can be against more engagement? So I do support the rule change, and I think it's important for us to do it in the rules because it's my understanding that council has never taken an action to legislate against ourselves. So I just want to make sure that technically we're sound, but then also that we promote equity at all times. So just my thoughts, and thank you for all of the citizens who put this together. I do have some citizens in my ward that have been very active on this and that have engaged me on this. So I appreciate their time and efforts on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Jenny Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with our colleagues' statements about appreciation for community members who have put great thought and time into this, and to our council staff for your research that's being presented today. I had a couple of, and I concur, I support a rules change, really appreciating the dialogue today. I have a couple of questions about the research as it's presented. One is the matter of committee meetings, and the proposed rules change doesn't stipulate how. So currently, I think some folks understand that it's possible to comment at committee meetings. Would it be possible to have part of this provide a clearer runway and clearer guidance and a kind of across the board rules about how someone who wished to comment at a committee meeting would do so? And why was that not included would be of interest.
Sure. So this was designed because of the Monday night. I think it was pretty much accepted that public can comment at committee meetings at the discretion of the chair. We can certainly clarify that if people don't understand that. But the point of this was clearly adding a component to the Monday night meeting.
Right. No, I concur. I don't think that the process to comment at committee meetings is widely understood. And so I would encourage the Rules Committee, Operations Committee to look at including that in a proposed rules change, just some language around committee hearings in addition to the Monday night meetings. And then I wanted to also, in terms of the research presented today, something that stands out to me is comment would be limited to only items on the council agenda. I think that having the time limit of 30 minutes is very reasonable. I think that we all know how full meetings can get. I think that is a very reasonable period of time. However, wondering why the research led us to limiting comment to agenda items. I think that some folks just want to be heard on, I'm thinking some of my constituents who may have a quality of life concern that, yes, they've told me, yes, they've called 311, yes, they've called the mayor's action line, and they just want to say it again. And even though we all know that a lot of quality of life concerns have a lot more to do with the administration than with council, it's not clear that folks would ever have a chance to address council. And then the second part of that is that council agendas don't typically come out. We're processing a lot, staff are processing a high volume of legislation and information. Sometimes agendas don't come out. There's really not a lot of time ahead of a council meeting when agenda items might be known. So I was curious about, in the process of research, how we arrived at that particular recommendation.
I'll let Ann and John comment on it, but my preference was that it had something to do with what's being considered by council, just to keep to the agenda and keep an orderly flow of the meeting. It does happen both ways, but I think, to the extent that if our agendas are out Thursday, I think to do a request, and this will fall on the operations side, is very achievable. But I'll let Ann and John, Ann, if you want to comment on that.
Right. So to the councilwoman through the chair, I think President Kelly kind of nailed, in this research, we found many cities did require a topic, either agenda item, ordinance, to help maintain that flow, to help maintain, to help manage some expectations. And the conversations I had with my colleague in Wichita, that really helped the staff in the office prepare for council meetings. We've seen it in cities where it is kind of a free-for-all, but through the research, we really were led to this conclusion that this would help create order and help manage through the staffing.
One of the things that we found out too was the fact that whenever a citizen would make a request to speak at a council meeting during the public comment portion of that meeting, they would also have to fill out topic cards, which would have to be reviewed by the council president as well as the clerk of council. So that was another sort of like check and balance to make sure that, everything is on point. That was used to make sure that you control the meeting, that you don't have a topic that could sort of interrupt the flow of the meeting.
I would thank you, everybody through the chair to our staff members. Thank you. I would encourage us to consider also in the rules clarifying where citizens can find the agendas. I think that would be a new practice, right, for a citizen to know, okay, Thursdays I can go here, I can find the agenda, know where to go to anticipate what will be discussed the following Monday. I have the luxury of relying on our staff sending something into my inbox, right? I always know Alan Dreyer is going to get something in my inbox and I'm going to know what's going on Monday. But insofar as the outward facing general public, what they see, I think they would be very helpful to clarify that timing of when the agendas are released and how the public can access the agendas. I'm remaining, I kind of want to keep open this thought about where would citizens go if they had a comment they wanted to make that was not on a listed agenda. I don't know if I have a good recommendation at this time, but I want to put a pin in that for future discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Joe Jones.
How you doing, Mr. Chairman?
Doing great,
Mr.
thanks.
President, to my colleagues. Certainly, I support the rule changes as relates to comments. But in the past, I remember it used to get kind of rowdy down in Cleveland City Council chambers. And Mike Polensky probably could talk about a little bit more in depth than that than I could. But having and making sure that we stay on topic and there's a good flow is really significant and important. So I'm not certainly opposed to that. And as I heard someone talk about committee in the old days, we used to have sign-up sheets in the doorways. So where if the public was coming in to hear a particular agenda item on the committee, you would always have the people who were for a particular subject matter and then those who were against. And we used to have those times when we would have sessions. I know when we were talking about the Brown Stadium, we had a lot of people coming in and testifying about that. And other various different issues as relates to big, huge projects. So certainly, I don't know. We've always done that in the past. It's a practice that I think we can continue to still do. If that would help with my colleague, Jenny Spencer. I think it's always good to have public comment. We are a public body and it's significant and important to always hear what the constituents have to say. I think that as we look at how we do our jobs, public service is really important, and serving the public is significant, certainly to all of us. And even though we go to a lot of meetings and do a lot of work and handle a lot of issues, certainly I think that this wouldn't be an issue at all for any of us. I appreciate the leadership that's here putting this forth, and I look forward to seeing those rule changes and mirroring some of what the committee, the citizens have been actively engaged. I commend them on their work, on their lobbying, and I have, Mr. Chairman, no unreadiness on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman Jones. So at this point, what I would like to do is make a suggestion that of this joint committee, the rules portion has supported the notion of adding the public comment portion somewhere between the call of the roll and the beginning of first reading. There's still going to be some operations issues that need to be worked out before we can take a vote to change the rules. This is going to require some staff coordination. It's going to require a process to be put in place. So I would recommend that the operations committee meet with the clerk. I believe I'll talk to Chairman Harrison offline about what this will look like, but I think now we need to just basically make a determination of what this will look like in practice. And then once we get that in practice, we will draft a rule change for the entire council to vote upon. So that's the process that I see going forward. I think this can happen in a reasonable amount of time, but I would leave that to the clerk, staff, and Councilman Harrison Operations Committee to work that out. Does that sound like a reasonable path for those that are on the call?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Okay. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and with that, with those decisions made and that path put in place, and then we'll take the next step, which is the operations part, which is going to be a little bit more of the heavy lifting. Councilman Chairman Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple comments, if I could briefly. I know we got to get on to finance. So first and foremost, thank you to Nora Kelly, to Attorney Trevisano, who spoke today and offered comment at the onset of this meeting. Thank you for all your due diligence, those who worked along the side, both of those two individuals to draft the proposed ordinance that many of us have seen. Thank you to council staff for your work and your due diligence and your research around this matter as well. Thank you, Mr. President, for working with operations to bring this discussion forward today. And thank you to my colleagues who all have been vocal, who have been active, who have been concerned, who've been participated in this process. Thank you to our attorneys and those who have also helped us look into this matter as well. Just a couple of points on what we've heard today. For me, let's not make this difficult, right? Let's keep this simple. Let's keep this straight to the point. Let's keep this exactly what it is to create a process, to roll it out in such a way that there's no guesswork involved, that it is clear, that is understandable, and that is good for each and every one of us, including those who, we expect to come down and participate. I come from a body that had public comment, county council. So as I've stated, publicly to my colleagues and others who have asked, 100% I support this rule change. And I've sat through hours and hours and hours of public comment on various topics when I served on that body prior to coming to Cleveland City Council. So I understand how this works. I know the process that we follow there, and we will address the council's concerns, operation committee members' concerns, and roll out something that will be good for everyone. And obviously we will engage every single one of you along the way as we do that. So rest assured that the operation committee will be reviewing this thoroughly with the clerk staff, along with the president and the rules committee as we move forward. So one thing that was brought up of how and when the agendas, I know at times in the past, agendas may have not come on Thursdays or at a certain point, but that is first and foremost one of the questions that I had as the chairman is about when the agenda will be released. We have to make sure that we are consistent, that we are thorough, and that we are on top of those type of issues that will very much play a part in how this go in terms of having public comment at the committee, at the public comment at the council meetings, and also looking at committee meetings along the way as well. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll end with that. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Look forward to this moving forward. Again, this isn't, it's not that complicated. It's just a matter of making sure that we put it in place and, make sure that our staff is on board. It's not overly burdensome, and we'll get it done. Like I say, we don't have to overcomplicate it. Madam Clerk, do you want us to sign off this for finance or a separate sign in?
She's shaking her head. Yes.
Is the answer yes, Makita? Yes.
It is.
Keep the screen up or sign off?
Sign off.
Sign off. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.